Wherever you are in the world, it's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. U.S. President Joe Biden announces asylum restrictions to control U.S. border with Mexico. Slovenia becomes latest European country to formally recognize Palestine as a state. Plus, authorities declare a state of emergency in Passau amid severe floods in Germany. The World Today starts now. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to retain power for a third term. The 73-year-old declared victory for his alliance in the general election, claiming a mandate to move forward with his agenda, even though his party lost seats to a stronger than expected opposition. According to the Prime Minister, Indian voters had, in his words, shown immense faith both in his party and his National Democratic Alliance, the NDA coalition. Official results from India's election commission today shows the NDA won 294 seats, more than the 272 seats needed to secure a majority, but far fewer than had been expected. And for the first time since his Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party swept to power in 2014, it did not secure a majority on its own, winning 240 seats, far fewer than the record 303 it won in the 2019 election. And this means Mr. Modi will need the support of other parties in his coalition, a stunning blow for Modi, who had hoped for a landslide victory. Let's skip over to the United States, to the state of New Jersey, which has held primary elections, joining other U.S. states like Iowa, Montana, New Mexico, and South Dakota, who have already done same. Voters went to the polls on Tuesday to cast their ballots to pick their favorite presidential candidate, as well as local representatives. Voters expressed their thoughts over the rematch between Republican former President Donald Trump and Democrat President Joe Biden. New Jersey has a closed primary system, meaning only Democrats and Republicans can vote for their party's candidates. The winners of both parties will be able to run in the November 5th general election.
I really hope that that people are going to be very engaged to vote this election season, even though this is a primary. It's a very pivotal primary, especially in Jersey City in District 8. I would hope that Trump being convicted would make people vote accordingly, but the problem is our Constitution does not bar anyone from holding public office, even if you've been convicted of a crime. So what are people are going to have to make a moral decision at the ballot box.
I don't understand how they only have two possible presidents that are more than 70 years old, and one's convicted and the other needs help. I don't understand.
I mean, probably Trump's conviction is hopefully going to affect those who are undecided to not to vote for him, but probably, his supporters are very determined. So I don't think that's going to affect them.
It doesn't affect me personally that he maybe did something wrong on his paperwork, but he's getting the shaft. I mean, the whole deal with the overpricing his properties so he could get a loan that he paid off, didn't default on or anything like that, and that's a crime. I mean, they're just making stuff up. And then you have wackos coming out of the walls talking about how he did this and did that, and you got wackos coming out of the wall saying Biden did the same thing. I looked at the constitutional procedure that should have voided the whole thing. It's really just, excuse the expression, a trumped-up charge, trumped-up conviction.
Just not right. It was fixed. It was obviously that there's an agenda against him. If it's not one thing, it's another thing. He may not be the nicest guy in the world, but you hate to see people getting dumped on like the way he was.
And in a bid to control illegal migration, President Joe Biden has issued an executive order to restrict asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border. The order, which was announced in Washington on Tuesday, took effect at midnight. It permits officials to deny illegal migrants asylum status unless they seek it through the established lawful process. It may be good news for the United States, but not for the 4,000 individuals who come into the country daily from Mexico. President Biden says the move has been put out to help secure the U.S. border.
Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them. This action will help us gain control of our border, restore order into the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage. One other critical step that we will be taking, and that has made a huge difference. We continue to work closely with our Mexican neighbors instead of attacking Mexico. To truly secure the border, we have to change our laws, and Congress needs to provide the necessary funding to hire 1,500 more border security agents, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backlog of cases, more than 2 million of them, 4,300 more asylum officers to make decisions in less than 6 months instead of 6 years, which is what it takes now, and around 100 more high-tech detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop fentanyl being smuggled into the United States. I believe that immigration has always been a lifeblood of America. We're constantly renewed by an infusion of people and new talent. We must face the simple truth. To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border and secure it now.
Let's bring in Channels Television's Washington correspondent Maria Bird. Maria, let's begin with the asylum restriction. Is it okay to assume the move is more political because this is an election year and immigration is one of the hot topics?
Yes, it's very safe to, see that this is definitely all due to the fact that he's been criticized. President Biden has been criticized for a lack of policy at the border. And so at this time, it is very much important for him to ensure that he seems like he has strong foreign relation policies. It's very important for him to find a way to be able to address something, especially if it is a little bit outside of even what traditional Democratic policy would allow. And so him asking and requesting that the borders be secured until the number of illegal crossings reaches below 1,500 per day, I think is his effort to be able to allow those Democrats who could be more in the middle, who might err on some areas of conservatism, are able to see him as having strong foreign policy measures. And so this is one of the measures I think that he's moving forward. But it's very clear that this is definitely not likely to affect his base, as we have seen, just a heightened number of crossings at the border. And so we're looking at 4,000 legal crossings a day and then 2,500 illegal crossings. And as you heard, as you all reported earlier, the president is stating that that is just what is not allowable and sustainable. And they're going to need to, even at the rates being reduced, hire more security at the border to be able to ensure that the safety of individuals, those who are legally and illegally crossing, and obviously those the security at the border are safe and secure.
So the order goes into effect, went into effect midnight, but it also goes into effect when the number of border encounters between ports of entry hits 2,500 per day. How would that be measured, Maria, and controlled, given at least 4,000 people cross into the U.S. daily? And for some people, they could reason they still have a chance if they wait until the next day.
Exactly correct. And so the measurement, obviously, for the legal crossings is very much within the policy and the process of the government's processing through immigrants that are seeking asylum. The illegal piece, that is obviously one that I think we are not quite as sure. Obviously, there's individuals that are at the border and probably there's some sort of counting that's being done while also trying to protect individuals and not allowing the illegal crossing. This is also obviously what's being received on once they get to the U.S. and oftentimes they are brought into facilities and areas and when someone is looking up their information, can't find it, which then is assumed it was an illegal crossing. And sometimes they're sent back, sometimes they're not. There are individuals obviously in holding facilities oftentimes that are end up being sent back. So those are all ways in which they are calculating the number of legal and illegal crossings into the U.S.
Now, former President Donald Trump says President Biden has totally surrendered the U.S. southern border and that his order is just for show. Isn't Biden's decision similar to what Republicans had been suggesting even before now to keep asylum seekers out?
This is similar, and I think that's part of the push is that he's been very clear to target those who are illegally crossing and being clear on how many are illegally crossing per day so that this would not be something that progressives are going to be overly outraged about. But you can, it's going to definitely be that many organizations who are proponents of asylum seekers are going to be bringing lawsuits against the government for this. So we are going to have a section that will be outraged as a result of this. But you're exactly correct. This is very similar. The only difference is that obviously those Trump Republicans obviously would love to see a wall there and obviously not allowing anyone to illegally cross the border and to have tighter restrictions around asylum seekers.
Exactly. The absence of a wall is what makes it different from what the Republicans had been suggesting. But let's talk politics. Maria, New Jersey Democrats and Republican faithful have voted in presidential primaries, joining other states. How soon can we know the results?
Well, we typically know the results that same evening, and so we can expect to begin to start to see results. They'll be publicizing those throughout the day, definitely when the polls close, typically around 8 o'clock in the evening. Sometimes it'll extend to 9, but they will begin to see if there's, obviously there's any tight races. Typically that might take a day or so because they might still have to do some hand counting or ballots that were sent in, or those written ballots as well sometimes have to be manually calculated. So, but more than likely, we would know shortly after the polls close this evening.
And how would the recent verdict against the former president impact on the polls?
Well, the verdict, as you mentioned, and as you all reported earlier, it's very much those who are in support of the former president. The verdict, being conviction or not, is not going to deter them from not voting for him. I think that it's also very clear that those who were not going to vote for the president, whether or not he was convicted or not, I think they are very clear that they are not going to vote. So I think that this does not have too much of a sway. It might have some more traditionalist Republicans consider not voting at all, not coming out to vote, or not voting for the former president. But for those who have been heavily supportive of the former president throughout his legal dealings, and those who have been strong supporters of Biden, or those Democrats who just could not see themselves voting for someone that's been convicted, are going to stay in that. So I don't think we're going to see much difference. The real call now is what's going to happen on sentencing day, July 11th, because if there is no time provided or given to the former president, then he has a very potential chance of giving the current president a very hard challenge in the general elections in November.
Yes, and the New Jersey polls and the other primaries going on in the country, they're all a precursor for polls in November, the November 5th elections. And sentencing in Trump's hush money trial comes in July 11th to be specific. Will the sentencing impact on Trump's name appearing on the ballot in November?
has him incarcerated for a period of time, and obviously that would potentially be past the date of the general election and potentially past the date of inauguration, that could be a prohibiting factor. But conviction alone and no formal sentencing that would not allow him to be able to do the duties of the job would not take his name off the ballot. So I think it's going to be a very critical moment for American history on July 11th to see what actually happens, because as we know, and as you said before, and as you've seen some of the regular average Americans walking through the streets, there's very diverse opinions. Those who are Trump supporters believe that this has almost been a witch hunt, and this has been something that has been charges that are not reality based or not things that should even be brought up against the former president. So this is a very, very critical point in time in American history. And as this primary is extremely important, the general election will be even that more important.
Really interesting times, and will be a really interesting election as well come November 5th with recent happenings in the U.S., events that have not been seen in recent times or in modern history. Thanks again, Maria, for joining us on the program. We're still in Northern America, but in Mexico. Beg your pardon, Americans beg your pardon, are still bracing up for extreme temperatures. A heat dome is expected to descend on the western part of the U.S. this week. More than 34 million residents, particularly in California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, have been warned by forecasters to prepare for temperatures that reach around 40 degrees Celsius before Friday. Some areas of South Texas saw temperatures reach 47.2 degrees Celsius on Tuesday. Just last year, similar temperatures killed at least a dozen people in the southwestern region of the country. Staying with the extreme weather, streets have been flooded and property damaged in the northern Texas city of Dallas after a massive tornado outbreak. Residents describe the incident as quick and scary.
Well, this is really scary, and we just stay front of the door because we're scared to fly. Yeah, and then we heard the very noise.
It felt like 90 miles an hour. It was quick. It was quick, like if you were in a town. And we were fighting for a while, but it didn't last too long.
Weather events in Germany. Authorities have declared a state of emergency in the city of Passau following deadly floods in the country. As comes after the Danube River reached water level marks of 10 meters on Tuesday, leaving parts of the city submerged in water. Officials say another river, the Inn, is also expected to reach the city with levels at around 7 meters, forcing the suspension of traffic in the city. Rescue teams have been patrolling the area, aiming to rescue stranded people as well as distribute supplies to those affected. In recent days, the German states of Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg faced severe flooding triggered by torrential rains. There's also been widespread destruction, which has claimed lives of at least 5 people. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who paid a visit to Bavaria, pledged solidarity and state assistance for those affected. Welcome back to the world today. Top scientists have revealed the Earth warming rate hit an all-time high in 2023, with 92% of last year's surprising record-shattering heat caused by humans. A group of 57 scientists from around the world used United Nations approved methods to examine what's behind last year's deadly burst of heat. Their study has been released as part of efforts to raise more awareness about the environment. June 5 is World Environment Day, and this year's campaign focuses on land restoration, desertification, and drought resilience. Under the slogan, "Our Land, Our Future," we are #Generation Restoration. This year, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is hosting World Environment Day global celebrations. The day is observed across the globe to reinforce and sustain awareness around environmental action by encouraging sustainable habits, conserving resources, and promoting eco-friendly practices. Officers, schools, governments, other organizations and local bodies hold events to raise awareness about environmental causes and involve local people to tackle plastic pollution and take action to protect the environment for healthy living. Well, here in Nigeria, it's been a day of webinars, activism, and other events celebrating the day, including tree planting. That's one of the activities. My guest, 1 Million Tree Initiative founder, Washington Uba, is here, has been engaged in for the better part of today. Welcome to the World Today.
Thank you very much, and I wish you a green day, and every other person there a green day.
Yes, and I hear you did so much work today. How many trees did you plant?
We planted 50 trees at Omole Phase 1.
50, oh my, trees. That's a lot of trees. And Omole Phase 1 is here in Lagos, for those who don't know, for our international viewers. Okay. So I see that this is being done every year, the planting of trees. I think that's been what many activists do on World Environment Day. There are so many trees planted on a day like this. And environmentalists are, always advocating for planting of trees. Why is this so important to our environment?
Good. Thank you very much once again. I want to break it down into 3 particular segments: wind erosion, soil erosion, and oxygen. First of all, we should know that without trees, we will not be alive, because our oxygen we breathe in comes from the tree. Yeah. So the less tree we have, the less oxygen we'll have. At the point where people cut down trees indiscriminately, we're not saying you should not cut down trees, but when you cut down, plant back again. So oxygen is key for our survival. That we're taught in primary school and secondary school, that oxygen, carbon dioxide will give the tree carbon dioxide, they give us oxygen. Oxygen is our lifeline.
Yeah, photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Now, the other one is wind erosion, which we were taught again in primary school and secondary school. What is wind erosion? Wind erosion is a natural process where wind comes and takes the topsoil from one location to another location, thereby making the soil, that particular area, not to be fertile, and creates porous nature of it. But with trees, is a windbreaker. So the issue of the wind erosion is going to be controlled by the trees you have around you.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, if tree planting has any impact on global temperatures.
It has a lot.
Because, the temperatures really rose last year.
Yes, it's about 1.36 as the current point now, degrees Celsius. And what the world is battling is, let it not get to up to 1.5. But the level we are going, industrialization from 1975 contributed to 2/3 of the global warming, because in the 19th century we were not as industrialized as this. So the carbon emission, 2 things are in the greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide and methane. So if we have more trees, there is what we call carbon capture. In a bigger grammar, I say sequestering. But we have to localize this so that it does not look alien to us. So the carbon capture helps to reduce the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the tissues of the wood of the plant, that keeps it for us and gives us oxygen. So if we keep cutting down the trees or not planting, the soil erosion will come, and the roots of the plants or the trees help to give the soil its ability to withstand flood or whatever. So these 3, the wind erosion, the oxygen, and the wind erosion, soil erosion, and oxygen, these 3 are very key. And in reducing the question you asked, global warming, a mature tree will be able to capture 10 to 40 kg of carbon dioxide annually.
So would you say that, if we have planted more trees, say we had planted more trees, would you say that, that would also reduce the issue of flooding, or that's just another matter in time?
No. It will reduce it, because the texture of the soil, the roots gives it its strength, that even when water comes, it does not dig the gully erosion or whatever erosions will have. So the tree in both substructure and upper level is important to us.
Yeah. And this year, World Environment Day is focused on land restoration, desertification and drought resilience. Tree planting would be a solution to this. Do break it down for us. Help us to understand, where all of this.
Okay, beautiful.
Because education is important. And I've heard activists today say that educating people is more important than just creating policies.
Absolutely. I agree with them. You see, there is something they call the Great Green Wall of Africa. It's the distance is covered from Djibouti to Senegal, just across the belt, during the Sahara and the Sahel. What are they doing? They are planting trees, 15 kilometers width and 7,705 kilometers in length across the Sahel. So that, because desertification is coming through the Sahara, so they are trying to see how they will use tree planting to protect the countries along that line. So the tree planting is key because that is the only way, not the only way per se, but that is what we can do to make sure that we protect desertification, drought resilience, and the land restoration. How do we restore the land? When you plant trees, the roots are there. The land does not lose the soil, topsoil again. You are restoring. Once you plant a tree somewhere, the degradation you have on the soil reduces. That is where the restoration comes in.
Yeah, and where does government policy come in?
Yes, government policy is key, but they haven't done enough. But why I don't really like to talk about the government is that the climate crisis will not come to the government because the government is invisible. It will come to humans. So if we call government, yes, they can do a lot through policies and advocacies and jingles. I remember when we were growing up in the 80s, we have this war against indiscipline. Why? Eco, you don't urinate anywhere. People got involved that even when you want to, no, they are coming, even whether they are there or not. Because there are plenty of jingles on the air, posters everywhere. That is the only way people will know. But we are treating the environmental issues with levity.
So government comes in with enforcement.
With enforcement.
Yeah.
And they have all the mechanism, the radio, the TV, the posters and everything. When you see it today, see it tomorrow, you begin to understand, truly, these people are not joking because it's our own life. Environmental crisis or climate change does not have territorial integrity. And when it comes here, it does not come to government because there's no government. Me and you are the government.
I want to bring up a question that I heard earlier today, and that is why Africa seems to be so, Africa seems to be like at the forefront of the receiving end of climate crisis. I mean, it doesn't really seem to be happening in other countries. I mean, they have ways of, mitigating some of these problems that you have mentioned. But for African countries where things are still supposed to be a bit more nascent, why is that such a huge problem for us?
Yes, you see, there is what we call climate justice. And it's an interwoven between human rights and development. Africa, in quotes, we are just a developing continent or whatever. If Canada has fire issue based on temperature, they have helicopters to fight the fire. If we have it here, it becomes an issue. So the downtrodden and the common man bears the brunt the more. That is where the climate justice comes in. That, the big man lives high, the poor man lives high. But when the flood comes, it's going to affect the poor man or the poor people. So we have more, I shouldn't use the word poverty, however, but we are more vulnerable.
Yeah. Vulnerable.
We're more vulnerable.
Yeah, vulnerable is the word. And then how do we break this down to ordinary Nigerians, people in rural areas, because that is where most of the trees will be planted, aren't they? I mean, here in the cities, we have more concrete cities than we have, places where you can plant trees now.
We are now in concrete jungle in the cities. Yeah. So in the local areas, they still have trees more than the cities because the level of carbon footprint and human activities is not as much in the local areas than the city. But when the rain comes, it does not know Lagos, it does not know Bayelsa. So one of the things I will suggest or advise the system is that we should put it into our curriculum from primary school to have ecological or ecosystem study that children will learn so that we can preserve tomorrow. Once we have it as we have mathematics, we have English, we have social studies, we should have environmental studies. Without you living in a nice environment, your mathematics or your physics does not mean anything, because when the rain comes, it's going to carry your certificate away. But if the child knows that a child should plant a tree in the school, when we were growing up, we had a belabor, we have trees in the schools. But when you go to schools now, children cannot even see butterfly, because where are they going to perch? Is it concrete? Is it interlocking blocks? So we need to start to save the next generation, because soon most people 50 will not be up to 100 years or whatever. So many people of our age now will not live so long again, more than 50 years or 60 years. But the one you have today can live 80 years. And if they know the nitty-gritty, and this is the challenges we have, by teaching them, because we always like when they teach us and flog us, you must do this. Once we have it into the curriculum, we are sure to safeguard the future.
Indeed, put it in the curriculum. Washington Obad, thank you so much for coming to enlighten us on this World Environment Day. We appreciate your work and we wish you all of the best.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully we will all get an opportunity to plant a tree sometime this week.
Thank you very much.
Your encouragement. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov continues his tour on the continent, with his next port of call at Burkina Faso, the third leg of his trip, his Africa tour. Mr. Lavrov has held talks with Foreign Minister of Burkina Faso Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré and also military leader Ibrahim Traoré in Ouagadougou. According to the Foreign Ministry press service in Russia, Mr. Lavrov, who's visiting the country for the first time, was presented with Burkina Faso's highest state honor following the talks. Meanwhile, before arriving in Burkina Faso, the foreign minister met with Congolese President Denis Sassou Nguesso on the second leg of his Africa tour. High on the agenda was the political crisis in Libya. President Sassou Nguesso is the chair of the Africa Union High-Level Committee on Libya and seeks to organize an inter-Libyan summit. At the end of Mr. Lavrov's working visit, Moscow and Brazzaville reaffirmed their commitments to increase mutually beneficial cooperation. Welcome back to The World Today. We're still here in Africa. A report into a building fire that killed 76 people in South Africa last year has concluded that city authorities should be held responsible because they were aware of serious safety issues at the rundown apartment block at least 4 years before the blaze. The deadly fire at the 5-story building in downtown Johannesburg on August 31st was one of the country's worst disasters. At least 12 children were among the dead. Another 86 people were injured, with some having to leap out of windows to escape the flames. Many of the victims were burned beyond recognition, having become trapped in the overcrowded building. It took authorities weeks to identify bodies using DNA tests. A man was arrested in January, facing 76 counts of murder after telling an inquiry that he started the fire while trying to get rid of the body of someone he had strangled in the apartment complex on the orders of a drug dealer. Retired Judge Sisi Kempepe was put in charge of the inquiry, which began in October. She delivered the first part of her report on Sunday and concluded that the city of Johannesburg, which owns the building, had shown total disregard for its calamitous state. She's also recommended the disciplinary action be taken against the chief executive officer of Johannesburg Property Company, which oversees the city's buildings. She said the buildings should be demolished and a plaque erected as a memorial to dozens of victims. Meanwhile, data from Statistics SA shows that South Africa's GDP declined by 0.1% in the first quarter. Power cuts and weak demand weighed heavily on the mining, manufacturing, and construction sectors. The economy also contracted in the first quarter of this year, following marginal growth in the last quarter of 2023. Economist Elna Moolman suggests that addressing logistical constraints through fiscal policies could serve as a means to protect the economy from further downturns.
The economy was significantly weaker in the first quarter of the year than we expected. If we look at it across the various sectors of the economy, then we see that more than half of the sectors contracted relative to the fourth quarter of last year. And even if we look at it on an expenditure basis, then we also see that this weakness was quite broad-based. There are mainly two reasons for this that need to be addressed if we want to see significantly better growth. Firstly, earlier this year, we still had significant pre-election uncertainty, and of course that uncertainty now continues as we wait for more clarity on the political landscape going forward. And secondly, we have persistent infrastructure constraints. In the first quarter of the year, we still had significant load shedding, indeed worse than the fourth quarter of last year, and ongoing logistical constraints, in other words, problems with railway and port operations. So if, as we go through this year, we see more certainty about the political landscape after the elections, and we continue to see progress in addressing the infrastructure constraints, then we should see a gradual improvement in GDP over the course of the year, and we'd expect to then also see stronger growth next year than this year or last year.
Here in Nigeria, the most ambitious transport infrastructure project since 1960, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway continues to spark debates and controversies across strata. In this next report, our correspondent Kelly Egiga x-rays the views of residents of Calabar, where the project is expected to culminate.
It's a rainy day in Calabar, but we are on the streets. Our exact location is the Goldie by Marian area here in Calabar, and we're here to sample the views and perspective of Cross Riverians about the construction work ongoing about the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Superhighway.
If there is a political will, I feel it can be done, keeping to time frames and then meeting up with targets as per the time frame. But if not, it will be one of those projects that, we've heard so many things in Nigeria. We bring up good projects, good thought-out plan, but implementation, zero.
It's not a bad idea. It's a good idea, but it's too exorbitant for the times. For 15 trillion, it's too exorbitant for the times. People are complaining. Shanties are being broken, houses are being scattered. Not everybody is getting compensation. I think the government has a good intention, but the cost of the project and the time. Why should we go into 15 trillion naira super project now? When civil servants are talking of high salaries, unemployment is at its highest level. Poverty is everywhere.
It's a very good idea if only the government will embark on the project. Because last administration, they wanted to do a train route. And up till date, we have not been able, sure, there was nothing like any project.
Well, it's a welcome idea, but it's not all that welcome because the coastal way is not, when people are hunger, they enjoy the coastal way. It's the living that enjoy any product, any development the government is making.
President Bola Tinubu called the highway a symbol of hope, unity, and prosperity for Nigerians when he flagged it off from the Lagos end in May. But despite the hype around the project, some residents of Calabar, where it terminates, appear to be unaware of it.
So have you heard anything about the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Way? What do you think?
No. I'm hearing it for the first time.
You've never heard anything about the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Way?
No.
Awareness will come soon enough as the road passes through neighbors Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Rivers, Delta at the south end, linking the southwestern states of Ondo, Ogun, and back to Lagos, opening up new communities along the way.
Cross Riverians are elated, and we're quite expectant that that policy would open up the economy of Cross River State. Cross River State is quite a promising economy with a lot of prospects. But the fact that the road network hinders our connectivity over time. So the coastal highway, it's a well thought out program.
I think the road is a good thing for not just Cross River State, all the coastal states that the road will go through. America's development started by road constructions, right? Their major assets that in some places is even one of the features that they put in almost all their promotional materials are their coastal highways. Some people will say, why don't we fix the old existing roads and all of that? But the existing roads have their own economic impact in the country. The coastal road has a different economic impact. It's not only going to favor trade in the country, it's also going to support the inter-Africa trade agreements being done by about 55 countries.
The commissioners suggest simultaneous construction from both ends of the highway.
Our reservation is that we're hopeful that this time around going forward, it will be given the impetus that it deserves. But we're quite elated and we're quite expectant, and we're looking forward to get the derivatives that are coming with that.
A lot of things have been told to us in the past, promises made and never met. So until we see a chunk of the population would like to see things happening before they believe they will happen, right? But so the perception on the streets is this real? Why are we starting the road from one end of the spectrum? Why are we not starting from both ends, right? People have those feelings, those perceptions, those concerns.
Most controversies around the 700-kilometer coastal highway have been centered on demolition of structures along its path, as well as misconceptions about the funding model. But the federal government is optimistic that these opinions will change with the staggering benefits it is expected to bring. Kelly Egiga, Channels Television News.
Finally, on the world today, hundreds of visitors gathered at a commemorative exhibition at the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall in Taipei, Taiwan on Tuesday to mark 35 years since the June 4th Tiananmen Square incident and honor the victims. Visitors viewing the exhibition listened to the organizers' commemorative speech, watched videos on a big screen, and played tribute by placing candles to form 8964, or writing notes such as "Never Forget" at the memorial. According to media reports, the commemorative vigil, organized by multiple civic groups, attracted around 2,000 visitors. The Tiananmen Square demonstrations, which took place in Beijing in 1989, saw thousands of students taking to the streets calling for democracy. It led to the government's use of military force on June 4. The number of victims remains unclear, although in 1989, China put the death toll at 200 civilians and dozens of security personnel. In 2017, UK documents released by then British Ambassador to China, Alan Donald, alleged there were 10,000 people dead. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.